My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. I refer to the Code of Conduct for Ministers, Section 1.3, Part 3, published in June 2022, personally signed by the Prime Minister, which states that ministers must accept they are accountable for the exercise of the powers and functions of their office and ensure that their conduct, representations and decisions are open to public scrutiny. Why is the Prime Minister failing to enforce this principle, deliberately withholding draft legislation from public scrutiny and requiring non-disclosure agreements be signed before stakeholders can scrutinise these proposed laws?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Wong.
In relation to the first part of the question, yes, I acknowledge the ministerial code. I don't think the question actually went to any aspect of that other than the second part of the question, which related to draft legislation. Senator, you didn't say which draft legislation you were referring to, so I'm not sure what. Well,
order.
Order. I'm not sure which legislation you refer to, Senator.
Order. 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 To members of the opposition, this is not your question, but in any event, you should be listening in respectful silence. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator. If it is the Religious Discrimination Act, and I assume, given previous discussions, it is, the advice I have is this. Obviously, there's been a long discussion on religious discrimination. I think since 2016 there have been 10 inquiries, over 260 hearings and consultations and 70,000 submissions. I understand that there has been targeted and confidential consultations, which is not an unusual process. The advice I have in the brief I've been provided with is that no stakeholder has been asked to sign an NDA in relation to the Religious Discrimination Bill.
Order.
No stakeholder has been asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement. If I'm incorrect on that and the advice I've received, I'll certainly come back to the chamber. This is a difficult bill. As you know, it's had a long period of discussion. These matters were first raised by, I think, Prime Minister Turnbull or Prime Minister Morrison. Prime Minister Turnbull, I think, originally, and then Prime Minister Morrison as well. We are conscious of the importance on something such as religious discrimination of trying to engage in this discussion in a way that is respectful and where we seek to bring Australians together.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hanson, first supplementary.
Thank you very much. I refer to commentary about the so-called Nature Positive Plan by economic expert Robert Goblinson, published in the Australian newspaper 2 weeks ago, and I quote, "The Albanese government is embracing some of the worst practices of dictator-driven governments to conceal controversial environmental measures." He also referred to stakeholders being required to sign NDAs, which is non-disclosure agreements, to see just part of this plan. Does the Prime Minister believe this conduct is compatible with the principles of the Code of Conduct of Ministers?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Wong.
I'm assuming that, well, Senator, you asked first about religious discrimination, now about the EPBC reform. That's sorry.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Hanson.
Relevance. I never mentioned the Religious Discrimination Bill at all in any part of my question.
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Wong.
No, you're quite correct, Senator. I inferred that from the interjections, and you nodded when they interjected, so I assumed that you had. That's the legislation you were referring to. If you were referring to the Nature Positive Bill, which I think is the EPBC reform, I understand that consultation on drafts of the new laws is continuing, that there is a broad view that there is we need to deal with laws which are seen by many as ineffective and inefficient. Obviously, people's perspective depends on which side they are in that discussion. The advice I have is that experts from almost 100 groups are examining draft parts of the legislation to make sure that the laws will be effective as possible, and we will keep engaging with...
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson, second supplementary.
Never answered that question. Actually, I referred to NDAs being signed and no reference to that whatsoever. With 9 bills guillotined in the Senate today, forced through with no debate or scrutiny, bringing the total of guillotined bills to 96 in this parliament, the Prime Minister is acting like a third-world dictator. When will the Prime Minister...
Hanson, withdraw that comment.
I withdraw that comment. When will the Prime Minister resign in disgrace for his failure to uphold the principles of Australian democracy and the Code of Conduct for Ministers which bears his signature?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Wong.
Well, Senator, I and this government, we are a party that believes in democracy and participates in the democracy. We are democratically elected government.
Order. Minister, please.
We are a democratically elected government. We work with the parliament, including in a chamber. This chamber Senator Ruston.
Senator Ruston, you are being incredibly disorderly. The minister is still speaking. She's got 32 seconds to go. If you have so much to say, I invite you to participate in taking note. Minister, did you complete your answer? Minister Wong, did you wish to continue?
Thank you. We do believe in making sure this institution works effectively. We don't have a majority in this chamber. The Senate has made decisions. I know that you, on some of those occasions, were on the other side, just as we were on the other side when you voted with the government on the previous government. And I would simply make the point.
Senator Ruston,
you... Something wrong here.
Senator Watt. Senator Watt. Order. Order across the Senator Cash and Senator Cash. That's right. All of you should be listening in respectful silence during question time. That's exactly right, Senator Cash. Minister, did you finish your answer?
So, Senator, obviously I disagree with the way in which you've formulated the question.
Thank you, Minister.
We don't have the numbers in this chamber, and we work with them.
Well, according to Senator Wong, the Prime Minister and his government are meeting the requirements of the Code of Conduct for Ministers and upholding the principles of Australian democracy. However, we know that's simply not true. This is especially the case with the Nature Positive Plan. They're hiding it. They're keeping it secret. Stakeholders have been invited to see some parts of the plan, but the restrictions on these people are extraordinary and anything but democratic, transparent or accountable. Before they're allowed to even enter the room, they must sign a large confidentiality agreement with heavy penalties, which stops them from discussing the plan's contents or even going into the room in the first place. Stakeholders are told they can't take photographs of the draft legislation and can't take any part of it with them. They're allowed a limited time to take a few handwritten notes. Labor rushes legislation through, not even giving senators remotely enough time to look at bills, consult stakeholders and constituents or develop a response or amendments. Labor was the only party which voted against my inquiry into the carbon capture trial threatening the greatest artesian basin. Senator Wong couldn't even answer my questions today about whether the Prime Minister is really standing by the Code of Conduct for Ministers that he personally signed. We're watching the slow death of Australian democracy. It began many years ago. It accelerated with the suppression of freedom and dissent by Labor and Liberal governments during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Digital ID Bill and the so-called Nature Positive Plan will only further the decline. And I'm warning the Australian people, keep your eye on this Nature Positive Plan because it's going to have a real impact on our environment, on the farmers, everything, and how we do business in this country. I'm telling people, the Australian people, wake up, Australia. Our democracy is being taken from us a piece at a time.